Hey guys, so today we're buying our refrigerator thermometer. So why are we doing that, Shelly?
So we can measure the temperature inside the pot when it is solar fridge.
Yeah. So anyways, our prof asked us how exactly are we gonna measure this. So that is actually part of how we're gonna do it, but we're gonna explain more on, our whole experiment this week. So look out for that.
Watch out. Bye.
Bye. Hey guys, it's Ton and welcome to week number 3 of Ton and Jelly Vlogs. So this week we're going through with our plan of basically starting with the Terracotta series. So what is that? That's one pot that's a traditional Zeer pot, which is terracotta on the inside and terracotta on the outside, and one pot which is a metal and terracotta hybrid. So that's metal on the inside and terracotta on the outside. Before I bring you over to Jelly, who's handling the pots this week, let's talk details. So what are our objectives and limitations for this project? And what are the common misconceptions about the Zeer pot? Because those are important for us to know to measure our success for this experiment. So for our objectives, like last week, we mentioned that we're going to be using a variety of different materials for our Zeer pots, and that's to basically test out if the material has any effect on the temperature that the Zeer pot generates. But besides that, a common question was, how are we going to be measuring the temperature? And what is our goal temperature? So we'll be using a non-contact infrared thermometer, and we're basically going to be measuring the room temperature as well as the temperature inside the Zeer pot. So our goal and our measure of success is for the temperature inside the Zeer pot to be 7 to 10 degrees cooler than the temperature on the outside, or the temperature of the room temperature. So now for part 2, which is limitations. So what are the limitations to our project? The first limitation would be the amount of sunlight or the amount of heat accessible to the area where the Zeer pot is in. So obviously that varies area to area and also on the weather conditions that are currently present. Because of that, we can't always guarantee a consistent room temperature because of how unexpected the weather can be at times. So the next limitation would be the frequency of watering the Zeer pot and the frequency of changing the cloth cover of the Zeer pot. So why is that? So this experiment is actually being conducted in me and Jelly's home. So depending on the week, it will either be in my house or in Jelly's house. And because we're in college, we're not always available to water the Zeer pot or change the cloth cover. We're actually really grateful for our families who've been able to help us through this even when we're not home. So how many times are we going to be watering the Zeer pot, and how many times are we going to be changing the cloth cover? So for that, we're going to be watering the Zeer pot and changing the cloth cover 2 to 3 times per day. So that's what we'll be doing consistently with all the Zeer pots. So we mentioned last week how we're planning to use a variety of different products to test out how the Zeer pot cools things. So we're planning to use drinks, medicines, and also vegetables. But unfortunately, our next limitation is that we will not be using food or vegetables. And why is that? And it's because we can't really guarantee a set temperature that all these Zeer pots will reach. So we can't guarantee we'll achieve a temperature that will keep the vegetables from rotting. And we don't want to waste food, and we don't want to waste money on things that might not really work and might just spoil, so we don't want to waste food. So our last limitation would be the relative humidity of the area. So what does that mean? So this information comes courtesy of rebuildingcivilization.com. To explain humidity and how it affects the Zeer pot, I'll just be reading an excerpt from them right now. So this excerpt from rebuildingcivilization.com basically states that no matter how much liquid you put or how fast the rate of evaporation is, the evaporating cooling temperature is still limited by the wet bulb temperature, which is basically an indication of the humidity of the area. So for measuring humidity, we're actually just gonna be using our weather apps in our phone to indicate the humidity in the area. So now for the misconceptions about the Zeer Pot, I'm gonna bring you over to Jelly. So just follow the ball.
Thanks, Don. So, hey guys, it's Jelly, and now I'm going to talk about the different misconceptions on the Zeer Pot. So, as we know, the Zeer Pot is a solar or evaporator fridge that can cool down your food, drinks, and medicine at a lower temperature. But there are also claims that are really misleading and, as we know, can be misconceptions. So, I'm going to discuss that now. The misconception number one is that it is believed that the Zeer Pot can keep or maintain a temperature as low as 6 degrees Celsius or 43 degrees Fahrenheit. And technically, that's already misleading because not all Zeer Pot work the same way as other Zeer Pots. There are things to be considered or factors to be taken into account when constructing a Zeer Pot. Three of those would be the location of your Zeer Pot or the environment that it is in, the temperature, and the relative humidity of said location. So a Zeer Pot actually requires a desert-like condition, or upon research that's 37 degrees Celsius. So anything that's cooler than that, it actually slows the evaporating process of the Zeer Pot. So if it's something hotter, it is faster and the temperature inside the inner pot is actually cooler. So when constructing a Zeer Pot, the laws of physics must also be obeyed. The location must be hotter so that the Zeer Pot will be cooler. Misconception number two, it is believed that you can only use water in your Zeer Pot, and technically you can just do that. You can only use water, but you can also use other agents such as acetone and rubbing alcohol to increase or fasten the evaporative process of your Zeer Pot. But you also must think that, or must consider that, if you use rubbing alcohol or acetone, you can't use the soil for other purposes anymore, because if you use it for plants, it will affect the growth of your plants. So you can always use acetone or rubbing alcohol, but it is the safest option to use water. Misconception number three, your Zeer Pot must be located in an area or place that is with direct sunlight. And that is a misconception because the Zeer Pot also works on shaded areas as long as there is a nice breeze on that location, and as long as it is cooling, your Zeer Pot is cooling or is evaporating, then it works, it's okay. So that's it for the misconception of the Zeer Pot, guys. And if you really are planning to construct your own, you must really take into consideration the correct environment that your Zeer Pot needs, and also take into account the factors that your Zeer Pot requires. And you must also have a reasonable expectation, because your Zeer Pot can not always work the same way that the internet shows or how other people's Zeer Pot shows. So that's it. And since that's all out of the way, let's now move on to the experiments.